Welcome, low ego action heroes. This is Debbie Levitt from deltacx.com. We're a full service CX and UX agency. We do projects, training, and consulting. Let me know if you need some help. And welcome to the second office hours of the day, because this is that once a month where I do double duty. And so please feel free to ask any questions that you have. You can ask them live in the chat, or if you need to ask anonymously because you're going to dish on your job, please head over to deltacx.com/links and you can find our anonymous office hours asking thing. And it's Ask Us Anything today because we will be joined in just a moment by a special guest. Hey, Manuel, Pradeep, Elliot. Good to see everybody. Elliot, I hope you're feeling better. And it's Manuel's birthday, everybody. Happy birthday to you. What are you doing watching my show? Go out and have a nice dinner already. Come on. Get out of here. You can watch it later. Hey, Chang, good to see you. Of course, let's quickly thank the low ego action heroes who are donating to the channel through the YouTube hard to find join button. But thanks to everybody. I ate way too many chocolate chips today, and so thanks to everybody. Oh, Elvina's here too. Wow, we're rolling out the red carpet for John. So we've had John on our show before. Let's bring him in, and he is back, and he's going to be taking your questions today. Sorry that some of the things on the screen are slightly covering him, but maybe he can move a little bit towards the window. There you go. Thanks. Sunshiny. And Leela is here, and Eduarda. So John, tell us who the heck you are, and let's get to know you.
Why, thanks, Debbie. I'm no one in particular.
Why are you here?
Let's see. I guess I'm here because of the great reputation you're growing for a community that talks about interesting things about UX. I'm a UX practitioner. I've been a UX practitioner for decades, since long before it was called UX. I've worked as a human factors engineer and as a cognitive and physical ergonomist. These days, I'm based in the Bay Area in California. I'm on a little island just next to San Francisco, and working with some of the big FANG companies so-called for their bloodthirsty practices.
I haven't heard that one yet. That's great.
Oh, well, thank you.
Hold on, I need to then do this. There you go.
Ah, there it is. Good. Yes, I was hoping to hear that at least once this week.
Yes. Oh, Chang recognizes you. Second time seeing John here, if I'm not mistaken. That's right. This is his second time here, and I've just checked. We have him on an every other month cadence. After this, he'll be back in November doing a guest spot. So probably November, January, March, and we'll do our best to keep that going. So, yeah. So let's see. Hey, Janice, good to see you too. And let's see. So we had an early office hours today, and I didn't get to all the questions, and I apologize to that nice person who showed up at the last minute and asked a question as I'm ending the show. I think it might have been Alexandra, but I'm not sure. But let's get her question taken care of. And of course, if you have a question, get it in the chat, get it in the anonymous thing. Oh, and Janice says, yay for a more frequent cadence with John. So you've got fans. All right. So the question that came in this morning was, hi, Debbie. I've just discovered your channel. I find it fantastic. Thank you. Me too. I have a question on how you choose a qualitative or quantitative tool that is appropriate at the moment. Now, I didn't get the chance to ask if she really meant tool or if she really meant method. So we might want to answer a little bit of each. John, you first, please.
Wow. Okay. Let's see. I hope I'm not going too far afield here. But for me, what you have to ask yourself before you start thinking about tools or methods is what are we hoping to get out of this? If somebody says to you, what's the day like outside? You should clarify what they mean. Are they asking whether it's sunny or not, what the temperature is? Is it going to rain later? Is the wind strong? What's the barometric pressure? There's all kinds of things they could mean. And if you dig deep and start investing your time in telling them about the barometric pressure, where they were just wondering what the sun level is like, then you're answering the wrong question. So your methodology doesn't matter because it's focused on the wrong thing. Um, I personally try to always use qualitative and quantitative together because the one really informs the other. And very often, when people think they want simple quantitative metrics, they don't have something simple that you can measure to give them an answer. They have qualitative style questions, and they want you to suddenly give them a yes or no, a binary answer, or a percentage. How do people feel about this? 73%. Just it doesn't serve your client and it doesn't serve you.
Yes. Sorry, I'm just letting it wash over me. That's good. So, yeah, so I think the point is be clear on that research goal first and what you're trying to learn, and see if mixed methods make sense, and go from there. I guess I think that's what I hear you saying.
Yeah, not only see if mixed methods make sense, but see which method makes sense. So I've worked with clients in the past. I don't know if I really need to reintroduce myself today, but
Yes.
check out my web presence. Yes? Oh, okay. So I've been in the industry forever. I have 7 university degrees and about 40 years of professional experience. That includes working for some of the biggest companies in the world and working on almost every continent. My degrees include 3 different PhDs, and all of the degrees are in different topics, so that just makes it more fun. Um, so I talk from a fair bit of experience, and I've worked with people at some of the companies that we all know the name of, and had really wonderful experiences there, and had really frustrating experiences there. Um, so very often people think that they know what they should do, and they think they know how to approach research because this is their favorite method or this is their favorite tool or this, and what I've often heard is this is how we do it here. And many, many times I've encountered simple situations where I had to almost act like almost put on my psychology hat and give a research team a psychotherapy session where we could just help them let go of some of their frustration and certainty and embrace uncertainty and embrace the fact that maybe they could be doing a better job if they just took a deep breath and thought about things before they started working. So I've literally had to explain to people that when you use a Likert scale, rate this 1 to 5, rate this 1 to 10. When you use that, you can't just average the answers. Now, anybody who's studied Likert scales and read Rensis Likert's original paper from the early 1930s, or his follow up from a couple years later, knows that you can't do that. But everybody who uses that as a research method now gathers the information and then averages it, which means that all of the data they're presenting, all of the averaged information is false. It's false data, it doesn't represent reality. So I would encourage the asker of this question to really try to dig deep and find out what it is people are hoping to have as an answer. Are they looking for a number? And if so, what kind of number? Are they looking for a series of recommendations? And if so, recommendations about what, towards what end? That kind of thing.
Joel Barr says, preach. And let's put up Janice's follow-up question before we go to the question that just came in anonymously. Can you give an example of really good experiences at well-known companies? Do
Sure,
they
sure.
exist?
Boy, they do. They do. I am not at any of those well-known companies now. So I can't say that I think really good experiences are the day-to-day experience of someone who wants to do solid research. I'm sure there are teams where that is the case. And I met a lot of good people who were working in good positions long term and seem to find that there. But I haven't found it as a long term situation where you could count on the team around you and management above you supporting good research practices. I'm sure they exist, not in my personal experience. A really good experience I had was, let me see, um, being asked at the end of explaining how Likert scales work and don't work at a big international meeting of a company that rhymes with Moogle. Um, I explained why this research pattern that was going on in a particular case study that had been discussed. I explained why that the numbers were just wrong, and they were acting on false data as a result. And I like to think what happened next. Not immediately. Immediately, I got shouted at, and people tried to berate me for bringing science into the room. But in the slightly longer term, within an hour or so, I was asked if I would write an OKR to help raise the level of awareness of this amongst the team. So in a good situation with good leadership, that's what you get. You get a wonderful response to new information, a scientific response to new information, where people say, oh, well, if we can validate that, then we must learn from it. So you can find that in these big companies, and I encourage you to look for it.
Thank you. Moogle. Okay, so our next question is, how do we come up with IA for a new product? I feel like doing card sort or tree testing is mainly to test already made IA. Would checking other similar platforms help?
You want
I'm
to
going to
tackle
let
that
you
one
go.
first?
I always let the guest go first, and then I add to it as if I have something to add after you. But, unless you're dying to hear me first, please take it.
Okay, well, how do we come up with IA for a new product? Wow. It depends on the product. It depends on how new it is. It depends on what the approach of the client or the company or your friend is to the product they're trying to introduce. Usually when people are trying to come up with something like that, they have a number of ideas that have informed what they're hoping to accomplish. Does that make sense?
To me, sure.
Yeah. So I think go from there. If you're working on something that's really, really new, go from there. Go from what they're hoping to accomplish. Um, yeah, tree testing, card sorting. I don't think there's anything wrong with these methods, but I don't have a lot of use for them. I'm an old school anthropologist. I think if you watch people and listen to people and ignore everything they say, except the stuff they don't mean to say, ignore everything they do except the stuff they don't realize they're doing, then you can extract data from that and find a good model of what they're actually thinking and doing. And I don't mean actually ignore everything they say, I just 80% of it.
Good luck picking the right 80%. Yeah, if I can add to that, the first thing that I would say is be careful of, shall we say, being inspired, in air quotes, by other platforms. I think that is something to stay away from. Sure, it's nice to know what the other company or competitor is doing. It's good to be familiar with them, but be careful of copying them or being inspired by them. Very often they have crappy IA. So it doesn't make sense to say, well, what are they doing? Let's just do something like that. It usually sucks. And so I would say that that would not be the direction that I would recommend. And let's see, Janice says, I'd imagine trying to figure out users' mental models and going from there. Am I on the right track?
Mental models are great if you have an idea of what that means. A lot of people are taught that a mental model is almost a caricature. And so you want to come up with a simplified version of what the human is. And come up with this cartoon character, often illustrated with a cartoon character, that has a list of attributes. And by looking at these 7 things about someone, we can say, this is our typical user, and this is how she's thinking. And that only works with cartoon characters. A mental model is a bit more complex than that, and it involves I shouldn't say exactly, it involves attempting to build insight into the actual feelings and thoughts of someone who is going through an experience. And the feelings and thoughts of someone who's going through an experience, as you know, if you do a little bit of introspection, that's not a series of yes and no answers. and it's not a series of intellectual answers. When people are going through an experience, part of their brain is experiencing it at a different speed than the other part of their brain. And the part of our brains that's having this discussion right now, where I'm speaking in words and you are listening to those words and assembling them into some hopefully logical pattern, that part of our brain, the prefrontal neocortex, the big wrinkly tablecloth that's wrinkled up and stuffed into our skull and wrapped around the rest of our brain, that part of the brain is the only part that can do logical things like language, like numbers, like logical processes. It's way slower than the more central part of your brain, sometimes called like the amygdalic region, right? That part of your brain reacts much faster. And that part of your brain is very emotional. So this is why, to give a practical example, this is why bouncing happens. People hit a website and bounce, and they haven't had the time to read anything there. The part of their brain that decided to bounce is incapable of reading. It just said, whoa, this is wrong, and left. And very often, after you've bounced from a page, you're left wondering for a moment, wait, what? It's possible you find yourself distracted. It's similar to when you're eating peanuts or potato chips, and you decide to stop, and a moment later you notice that you're chewing again. Because the part of your brain that wants to keep eating peanuts or potato chips didn't pay any attention at all to the part of your brain that was thinking logically about the consequences. So a mental model has to include multiple levels of processing that are going on. Fast reactions, slow reactions, intellectual processes are just the tiniest part of it.
I'm
Now,
going to
I'm
make a
afraid
note
I
that
can't.
we talked about mental models here. Let me see. Mental models, just adding for the YouTube description. Yeah, Elvina said, is starting with approximate content or information itself a right way? Even if the system is completely new, we should still know the features or content we will have from research, of course.
Sure. From research and from initial designs. If you're trying to build a ticket buying app, then there has to be some ability to find tickets and buy them. You don't need research to do that. That's in the prospectus. I hope
And
that makes sense.
And back to, I'm just going to circle back to the original question before I put the next one up. And that would be, I think that it depends what you mean by information architecture, because information architecture is a lot of different things. We've got taxonomies and hierarchies and sometimes the visual hierarchy of a page and information systems and catalogs. But I find very often when people say IA, they really just mean the navigation of a website or app or SaaS portal. So if we really do simply mean, how do we come up with a better navigation for a SaaS portal? I'm not against the card sorting, tree testing thing. I think those can be good. They're as good as your planning and execution of them. Yeah, and
You're here.
recruiting and all the things that go with it. This is my graphic of all the things that go, at least the main general phases of research. All of these are still in play, even if it's unmoderated or you're using a tool for it. So don't forget that. But I think that for navigation, that can make sense. One key mistake I do see, especially if people are newer to this, is they learn about card sorts and they set up a closed card sort where all of the categories are pre-decided based on what you think or your stakeholder thinks are good categories. And to me, you've pooped on your own card sort because you've created a paradigm and you've said fit these things into our paradigm. And I would rather do an open card sort where I can learn what other people's paradigms are.
Here. I'll second that. And I'd like to come back to what you just said. I wasn't even thinking of IA meaning also the interaction patterns. I was thinking of IA strictly in terms of the underlying structure of the way the information is stored and processed. So, right. Excuse me, that's, I guess, more of an old school take on that.
No, we love old school here. That's why, and why you're here. So yes, yes to that as well. But just guessing what the question actually meant, I'm running with that. I'm going to throw Chang's question up. Chang just wants to know more about you. He says, How do you manage your time to finish 7 degrees or other perspectives that help you with all the achievements?
Well, that's very generous interpretation, Shane. Thank you for thinking it was intentional. Um, I guess I was, from the time I was a little boy, I slept 3 hours a night. So that makes a big difference. I've got about 5 extra hours every day while other people are sleeping. I was raised on a farm uh, for a good portion of my youth and understood the importance and necessity of working all the time. So I've always been a bit of a workaholic that way. When my friends were going to university, I was going to university with them and working at least one job. When my friends and social circle were working, I was going to work with them and studying at least one thing in my spare time. So I guess it's a little bit of time management and a little bit of lucky genetics and a little bit of just being willing to spend a good portion of your life exhausted.
Are you sleeping more now?
Yeah, when I was in my 40s, a couple of friends, literally a couple who were friends of mine, were physiology profs. And one time while we were sitting and chatting, they said, you have to sleep more than 3 hours because your body only heals when you're sleeping. And if you don't start sleeping more, it will kill you. So it took me almost a decade, but I learned to sleep more. I often sleep 6 hours now. Not always, but often.
Congratulations, that is an upgrade.
I guess. I wish I'd tried it earlier in my life when I was busy frustrating living partners with how little I slept.
Oh, they should have loved you for who you are.
Ah, thank you.
That's at least my
I
my
would,
perspective on that. Chang says, "Thank you for answering my question." The next question is a bit of a story, so here we go. It's the font is microscopic. I'm going to read it out loud. Everybody, take notes. Here it is. Hello. I work at an agency as a UX designer, and we're developing a B2B system. We're working on the MVP without any access to users because the client didn't want us to. Too complicated, no time, privacy, sector. There was some talk about user testing of the MVP, but it's not concrete and it's not clear what our involvement is. I think we could support well in that and add a lot of value if we could do proper observational research or at least interviews. Do you have any suggestions from past experience on how to try to convince the client to do research properly? This is the client convincing question.
wow. Yeah, that's a
Joel
tough
says
one.
bail. Get out of there.
Yeah, if you're at a point in your career where the jobs are coming to you so quickly and in such great numbers that you can walk away from clients who are hard to work with, and then walking away from a client who's hard to work with is a good way to establish a high win rate, right? It's like a lawyer picking their cases. If you only pick the ones you know you can win, then you're going to have a good reputation for winning and a bad reputation for being helpful to those who need your help. Um, I think it comes down to how much you want to help the people who need your help. If the client is adamant that no research needs to be done, then the way you help them is by doing no research. If your bosses in the agency have decided that is the approach they're taking, in other words, we want the client's money more than we want their product to succeed, then, as a cog in that mechanism, your job is to keep the wheels turning. And so you do the work the way they want you to do it, and you don't raise flags, and you don't say this would be better if. If there's time for that in a review later, you can say it. And you can raise that with your management, and you can even raise that with their permission with the client. That it would be good if we could have a time to discuss foundational principles later on or possible issues. One of the ways I do it is I don't map user issues when I'm figuring out the journey that a user will be on. I map hazards. And a hazard is a potential disaster waiting to happen. And that's what I try to make them aware of. I try to make the agencies I work for, the direct clients I work for, the friends I help. I try to make them aware of the potential for hazards in the same way that you would um, teach a kid to walk safely in the streets of a city, right? You have to warn them about the hazards. Don't stand where a car can clip you when it's parallel parking. Sure, this is still sidewalk. Cars don't care, right? Things like that. So there are hazards in everything we do every day. There are hazards in designing a minimum viable product that has no user information in it. And just make them aware of that. MVPs, can I just say for a second, that's one of the worst choices for acronyms ever, right? In North American English, that usually means most valuable player.
Right.
And if you start calling the minimum viable product the most valuable player, then you're corrupting the language and insulting the process that you can take products through. Yeah, so in order to preserve your job and your mental health, do what your management wants you to do. Please the client the way they want the client to be pleased so that they pay and you have a paycheck. If you're a maverick and you don't mind blowing things up, then just say this will be a great design for you and it won't be a great design for anyone else.
Yeah, we've had some great comments from the chat room. John says, John Junger says, we have to try to convince them of the risks of not doing research. Joe says, I'd add into a proposal or state outright the impact to adoption. When all is said and done, the system doesn't work the way people expect. The design team will be blamed. While I agree with our John that ultimately you are probably stuck doing whatever your lead or your manager says, especially if this is an agency consultancy kind of place where someone has already priced out whatever this is. Someone has said, this is the project we're doing, this is how long we're spending on things, there won't be any research, and that's what we sold to the client. And you can't come in now and be like, oh, but I want to add a few weeks of this type of research or this evaluation. You're probably not going to be able to do that. This is more of a conversation with your management or leadership or the sales team. Hey, next time you're proposing stuff, work with us so that we can make sure this stuff gets built in. We'll have a better product in the end, and you'll make more money because you just sold them 3 more weeks of work. So maybe that's something for the future. For now, you might be stuck. I do believe in risk documentation. Now, depending upon your relationship with that client, you might be making internal risk documentation. Hey, me, manager, stakeholder, internal stakeholder, project manager, engineering lead. I want to make sure we've just kind of written this down for ourselves that by not doing this, these are the risks that we run. These were some decisions we made that could end up biting us in the butt later. But I think it depends on your relationship with the client. Because clients are usually hiring me to be a change agent and strategist, not a pair of hands. If you've been hired to be a pair of hands and they don't want your suggestions and they don't want your advice and they don't see you as that type of partner, then it's a bit of know your place. And you're a bit stuck, as John said, in where you are. So I think these are internal conversations you should feel comfortable having. Even if someone says, hey, yeah, sounds interesting, cool, that maybe we could have saved them some cycles of mistakes later, but hey, that's what they wanted from us, so we did it.
Yeah, and I'm afraid you will get that response from just about everyone, if they're even polite enough to respond that much. I've had people in large and small companies on 3 different continents get that advice from me, PhDs in pocket, right? Decades of experience in pocket. I've had people get that kind of advice from me and turn and walk away without bothering to respond at all. So a lot of folks who know their process, and of course they're right because they're getting paid bigger bucks, of course they're right, those folks will not back down from a decision or consider other information. So I'd like to actually suggest, Debbie, that the folks paying attention to this go even one step further than what you said. You said you differentiated between the feedback that you can give to the clients and the feedback that you keep in-house. I'd say there's one more step, which is the feedback you take for yourself. Even if you're in a situation right now where you're hired as a pair of hands, you can absolutely take note for yourself of what happened and what you think should have happened, and use that to motivate yourself to become better at your job, keeping in mind that this is something you can work towards. And when you get a chance for an AMA or something like that, you can ask people about it and how do I capitalize on this? How do I advance my learning in these ways? How do I learn to present this stuff better for the times that I can do it? And the first step of that is, of course, recognizing the difference between the times when you can and the times when you can't. So don't get yourself fired over knowing that you're right. A lot of young folks and early career people do that. Keep the paycheck going, support your family, support yourself, and try to get to a point in your career where you can make those decisions without losing the knowledge that you should make them.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah. And comments in the chat room. Manuel says, for those kind of projects, do you still put them in your portfolio and state that you tried to convince people, or scrape it off? I think that's up to you. I do have a couple of those in my portfolio. I do have a couple of things where I said I attempted to save this project from carnage. These were the people I warned and how I warned them. Nobody wanted to listen to me on that. And the project went ahead and 6 months later had to be undone. So I've chosen to put them in, but that's because I sell myself as a change agent and someone who's going to try to improve your processes so you have less risk and waste. So for me, it makes sense to tell that story, but it might not make sense for everybody to tell that story.
Again, I would say the same thing. It depends on the level that you're hoping to work at. But if you were applying to me for a job, and please don't apply to me for a job, I have no capacity to hire anyone at the current time. But if you were applying to me for a job, one of the things I'd like to see is projects that failed, and projects where you disagreed with the client, or projects where you disagreed with your manager, to see how did you respond to everyone. Were you a prima donna, refusing to do anything you disagreed with? Or were you someone who could say, I disagreed with this, but they had their methodology and that was what I followed? Once you've done that, can you track where things went right or wrong? I posted something on LinkedIn a few weeks ago about how if you don't learn from your research mistakes, from products that shouldn't have been delivered that were, then the product can't improve before it goes on the market. And the fact that this isn't a built-in part of UX research in industry now means that these products go forward to market without being really market ready. They're market ready by the metrics being used by the company, but they're not market ready in terms of being prepared for the audience. Because in Silicon Valley, and I imagine in other parts of the world as well, professionals in our field stay at a job for no more than 3 years and often much less. They go off taking their certainty about their methods to the next company, even though the product that they're bragging about having released fails. They don't know that. They're not at the company long enough to see the failures build up behind them. And they don't look over their shoulders. So they're taking bad methodology further and further afield and spreading it across industries, unaware of the fact and unwilling to look for whether or not the products are actually failing because they didn't do enough for the right kind of research.
Great stuff. Yeah, very, very true. Really good points. And I have to apologize to everybody. We have gotten so many questions coming into the anonymous universe. I think we might have to close questions out of fear that we're going to run out of time. So apologies to everybody that I think questions are now closed. And I'm going to try to put these up as fast as I can, just in case we can fit more in. But yikes, so many things have come in. Aaron says, Hippo, highest paid person's opinion. Learn how to talk to that person. Janice says, makes a lot of sense. Thanks for sharing the advice given different stages of someone's career. I'll put up the next question because they are just coming in wildly. I've done interviews already, but it seems to align with what the stakeholder wants to build. I don't know if my research is biased or coincidence. How can I get more insights and impact in UX research?
Well, when you're doing interviews, it's really important. I know this is the opposite of what everyone says. Usually you will be handed a script from from a stakeholder, or a script approved by stakeholders, or a script cut and pasted from previous interviews with slight modifications by teams who are kowtowing to the hippo, as we say. Don't do that. When you do an interview, have a conversation with the person that you're interviewing. Spend 5 minutes giving them the convinced perception that they are the most important person in the world, and that you want to hear whatever they think, even though nobody else wants to hear from them today. Make them feel certain with your pleasant manner and attentive behavior that they can open up to you, and then let them open up. Don't go through a script. What I do is, if they have a script of things they want addressed, I break that down into a checklist. And I keep the checklist out of sight of the person I'm interviewing. I focus on the person I'm interviewing so that they know I'm really listening to them. And then out of their sight, I hit things on the checklist with a check mark or with a timestamp. Ideally, I don't even do that. I have someone else who does that while I'm interviewing. So my entire focus can be on letting the person feel so listened to that they open up about all the things I want them to open up about. And then I ask questions, redirecting them when I have to towards different things that are on that checklist. But I never ask them a direct question. I never ask them for their opinion about this or about that if I can help it. I let them talk and let their conversation lead into more conversation. If you do that, then you avoid the possibly imposed bias that you're getting from your questionnaires. This is, in my experience, this is the number one reason why interviews all tend to produce information on the things that people, that stakeholders want to have information on, is, and that information on those topics is geared the way the stakeholder wants them. It's because those questions are geared towards what the stakeholder wants. The people in the room are geared towards what the stakeholder wants. You yourself as an interviewer, with or without years of experience, you yourself as an interviewer are going to be biased towards what your stakeholders want to know. So control that, have conversations. Once the conversation is done, then you have to do the really hard work that nobody likes to do anymore. The really hard work of going through and extracting the data. The data isn't a quote. The data is what is reflected by the things the person said and did and how they said them. You extract that data and you'll have actual information about how they feel about the things that will often be completely contradictory to what they were saying at the time. Oh yeah, this is great. This is really easy, someone says while failing to use it 7 or 8 times. Right? So you have to treat it like, you treat an interview like an anthropological or ethnographic research session, not like a reporter trying to get a quote for a blog.
Yeah, and what I want to add to that, even though that was fantastic, would be, yeah, without knowing what you asked or who you asked or how you asked it, my gut says that you did not plan the research correctly, or as John kind of hinted at, you let someone else plan your research and bias what you were going to say and do. And this happens a lot. I spoke to someone the other day who said my managing director changed all my questions. And so, look, we know that this happens. It's not necessarily your fault. Sometimes you just can't fight that person, and it's not worth your mental health. But I would say if you have accidentally or unpurposed or unknowingly validated the stakeholder's idea, chances are the research might have been designed to validate the stakeholder's idea. The research, we say this all the time on the channel. Thank you for the sign language applause. We say all the time here that your research has to be solution agnostic. It's not about, is this the solution you want? Is this the right solution for you? Even in evaluative research, I don't care if the whole thing crashes and burns and everybody gets every task wrong and fails their way through everything. I'm solution agnostic. I just want to do the most learning that I can. So that would be my gut feeling without knowing what you asked or any of that. And how can you get more insights and impact is you're going to have to separate yourself from what the stakeholder wants. You might have to throw in a couple of their questions questions for giving the dog a bone, but then you're going to have to write some better questions or discussion, conversation possibilities so that you're not just the stakeholders' ventriloquism puppet. That would be my thoughts on that. Let me throw the next question up because we're just getting more and more. How can I get better at asking questions during interviews or observational research? How do I get to Carnegie Hall?
Yeah, exactly. And the answer is exactly the same. You take a left on Fifth. Um, you get better by
Depends where
being
you're coming
exposed
from.
to it. Yes, yes, it does. You get better by being exposed to people who are better at it. If you don't have a chance to be exposed to people who are better at it, then you get it better by making mistakes and acknowledging your mistakes. This is how humans learn, which is why it's important to me, calling back to a previous question, that you do include portfolio pieces that show the things that failed. Right? Humans don't learn through success. As Bill Gates once said, success is a lousy teacher. And if you've ever tried to use any Windows products, you know that he's speaking from experience. Um, if you can't get access to people who can show you better ways to do things, then work with peers who also don't know, but also are trying to figure it out. Um, Read blogs, uh, follow streaming shows like this, look for experts that you can get access to. I'd say read my books, but I don't think I have anything that directly expresses that. Maybe my first book, Anthropology Based Computing, has some sections about how to do research yourself. Um, but yeah, sometime in the next little while, I'll hopefully put out a book that has, you know, tips on how to do research quickly and well and learn from your mistakes. It's a hard thing. I'm sorry for you. It used to be that when you wanted to learn a trade, you could apprentice with experts. And these days, nobody wants to hire the experts.
Or the
Nobody wants,
apprentices.
and nobody wants to have apprentices. Instead, they hire the people who should be doing apprenticeships as experts.
Oh, so true. It hurts.
I've, I've seen so many ads for senior UX researchers, and the required experience is 1 year or 2 years. That's not even a junior user experience researcher or researcher of any kind. Um, so yeah, try to find people you can learn from. And I'm really sorry that that's hard to do. I really am. But please don't ever think there's a quick and easy solution where someone can teach you the trick and then you know it. You will have to practice. You will have to learn. You'll have to be discerning and decide who to listen to and who not to listen to.
Yeah, I agree. I have to say, when John started his answer, I thought of something from my teen years. And I remember I was a tennis player in high school. And I remember I had a season where, based on how I was ranked at my school, everybody who was ranked to play against me from other schools was like county champions. And I was good enough for me because I'm not competitive. And so I pretty much lost every match for the entire season. And finally, the coach was like, "Are you upset? Are you depressed?" And I said, "No, I've learned so much. Like, I wouldn't have learned as much if I'd been winning the matches. Like, it was better for me to lose the matches." And yeah, and I remember a tennis camp I went to paired me up with kids who were slightly better than I am, and I was 16 and they were 12. And some people were like, "Are you upset that you're losing to 12-year-olds?" And I was like, "They're awesome. I'm learning so much. They're nice people." And like there's nothing bad happening here. Like there's no ego here. And so I think that the number one thing that someone can do to learn more and get better is to turn off that ego and to look for the Joel Bars all the other people who are out there mentoring and coaching and helping and for the people who I coach or apprentice under me and don't apply, it's closed. Please don't send me stuff. Don't put things in my calendar. But for the people who I coach or mentor, I watch their videos. They record their videos and I watch them, and I do Deb reacts to your interview, and we talk about what they could have done better. I don't put it on YouTube. I send it back privately. But ultimately, practice with an expert checking it out and giving you feedback is going to be the main way to go, because all these people who say, well, I'm just going to volunteer or work at a startup as a UX team of one, you have no expert looking at your stuff, so you're unlikely to just magically grow. As one of my favorite bands sings, I don't even know what I don't even know.
Hear, hear. Hear, hear. The Johari window, if you want to look that up.
Johari window. Don't know that one.
The Johari window. It's a neat 4-pane window that shows the difference, or shows a framework for, literally a framework for the things you know, the things you know that you know, the things that you don't know that you don't know, and the relationships between them.
Reminds me of the conscious competence, conscious incompetence, unconscious competence, unconscious incompetence model, but it sounds different as well.
Yes, it's you might say that the two are related.
Cool.
Yeah, one of the things I love to do, and sometimes the client thinks of it and sometimes I think of it, but one of the things I love to do is to take anyone on board who's in the company who wishes they knew research and mentor them during a project. I had a great opportunity to do that at LinkedIn and helped a young designer become a almost as young researcher, and she was brilliant, did fantastic work. Unfortunately, I had dissimilar experiences with other people at the same company who were already working as researchers and really shouldn't have been. And they felt so fragile about their skills that they couldn't accept criticism or advice. And it's really a shame. Try not to ever get into the position where you feel you have to protect yourself from new information.
Yes, that's why we talk about being a low ego action hero here. So, yes to that. And thanks to Melanie for the comment. It's especially important if you're a research person of one to find those people. Yes. Our next question says, hello, John. Over the past decades working as a UX professional, what advice would you give a junior with just 1 year of experience? What lessons have you learned?
Wow. It's good that you're asking. Yeah, it's been so long since I had just 1 year of experience. Basically, what I've learned since then is everything. I had the good luck to be trained by really brilliant people who gave me a fantastic wealth of information that I tried very hard to be able to apply early on. But during my early years working, I realized that a lot of the things that I had learned had to be applied differently in the real world than in the classroom, and differently on one job site than on another job site. And so it's good that you're asking, because this shows an eagerness and willingness to learn. Maintain that. Maintain that and hold on to it. That might be the best advice I can give you. Stay willing to learn and stay willing to change the way you do things. And when you come across really great, solid mathematical or scientific principles or behavioral principles, hold them close and don't let them go. But techniques and opinions, you should let go easily, like the tide washing in and out. Like not even the tide, like waves washing in and out. Let the new information wash over you, and let go of the information that isn't practical or that isn't foundational. To quote Bruce Lee, be the water, my friend.
Thank you for that. We had the Zen moment with John that we're all waiting for. And now a cleansing breath. So I don't think I have a good Zen graphic. I'm going to have to buy a whole new bunch of graphics. I still have my cheesy empathy graphic. I put that on whenever I say empathy.
Nice.
Okay, so let's jump into the next question. Doing research well from the start makes so much sense rationally. Why is it so rare?
The reason it's rare is for, well, it basically comes back to what Debbie was saying a minute ago in response to another question. The person with the highest paycheck in the room, to cite a comment from someone whose name I don't recall at the moment.
Yeah, that was Aaron.
Thank you. So Aaron's lovely callback to the hippo in the room. These people feel that their title enables them to make more important decisions than the experts they are supposed to be consulting. This is not the case when you're working with people who are going to be great to work with. But this is the case in more than 99% of the companies I've ever worked with. And I think you'll find the same is true. I'd love to get into a discussion of the Peter Principle here and my own Paul corollary. But the point is, when people feel that they are the best person in the room because of their job title or because of their rate of pay or because of their rank or because of their
I've been doing this for 25 years.
Yeah, exactly. Or look who I work for. Who do you work for? Or any of the other ego blasting phrases that might come out of someone to justify the fact that they don't have to listen to anyone else. Anyone who approaches research with that attitude is approaching it with that attitude, right? Like Maya Angelou said, when someone tells you who they are, listen, right? Someone who already knows all the answers doesn't want answers from research. They want confirmation from research, right? So that's why it's rare to have really sound research right from the beginning, because most of the people, not necessarily the ones paying for it, right? The ones who are taking penis rockets into space. But the most of the people somewhere between that person and the bureaucracy and you, somewhere in there, most of the people who are there are just trying to justify their jobs. They're just trying to make sure they still have a paycheck next month, whether or not anyone else does. And their opinions of their own expertise, not always, but they tend to be more important than their respect for anyone else's knowledge or abilities. So it's one of the nice things about being at my age, my stage of my career, is I draw a line in the sand. And I say to people, no, that isn't a sound research practice. I can't do that. You know, there are lots of people who can. By all means, if you want someone who will do bad research for you just because you have the money, throw a stick. You'll hit a dozen of them, serving coffee or trying desperately to find a way to get into the industry because they love it so much and want to do it, right? Everybody who's building their portfolio out there will be tempted by money to come and do bad work so they have a chance to learn to do better work. But don't hire me to do bad work. I won't do it.
Agree. So research is rare because people don't want to hear the different opinion. They don't want to hear their idea is bad. They don't want to hear their baby is ugly. They don't want to hear their strategy sucks, or we've noticed they have no strategy. They don't want to hear it. You know, I think in UX, we get used to being mostly surrounded by kind and intelligent people who are lower ego and open-minded. Though some in UX are not that at all, but many of us, I think, fit that description. And then we get out of our little box and we go meet some project managers and product managers and engineers and marketers and business analysts and other people, and they get ahead by having a different set of personality traits. And I'm not saying they're all evil dickheads, but in some cases, some of them are. And then we're like, does not compute, you know? So it's just different styles, and that's part of why it's so hard to convince people of research. But I'm hoping my new book will help there. Let's see. Elvina, we're going to interrupt for a moment. Elvina is asking, what books have you written? Can people just go into Amazon and type your name and look for books with your name on it? Just type in John N.A. Brown.
Yep. I've got 3 books with my name on the cover. The
Okay.
first one is anthropology-based computing, putting the human back into human-computer interaction. Um, the next one is about the hunting of the snark. Let's see now. Have I got a copy of that here? I don't see one right away on the shelf, but yeah, anthropology-based computing. That's that
Still
one
in the
there.
shrink wrap.
Still in the shrink wrap. Yeah, the publisher sent me some copies, and it's pandemic time, so who am I going to give them to? Then there was one about smart homes and developing a new paradigm for easy interaction with complex intelligence systems, and that's called Hunting the Snark. The one after that I co-edited with some friends. It's called Set Phasers to Teach, and it's about how researchers, professors, and scientists and engineers use Star Trek in their day-to-day work. I've written chapters for a dozen books, maybe 2 dozen now. On a separate note, this one's also really fun since Star Trek got a laugh. This is the new Rutledge Handbook of Star Trek, which was just published this month. And I don't have an article in here, but I did the cover. So that's the
Cool.
first design that I've sold in a while. There,
Congratulations.
that's my shameless self promotion.
Excellent. Always do it on the show. Quick question. I think we have three more questions, and I know we're usually ending in 3 minutes. Are you able to run late with us today, please?
I would love to,
Oh, great.
but
Thank you,
no
sir.
more than 12 hours.
All right. Yeah, we have to end eventually. Eventually, I'm going to need a toilet and a bed. So we'll try to keep it under control. We have a little bit of a personal question here. John, do you feel like you're still learning and improving even after all your experience and degrees?
Wow, what a wonderful question. Um, to be honest with you, I feel like all of my experience and degrees have made it easier for me to improve and learn every day. Eventually, great mentors, great professors, great fellow students, great fellow journeymen along the way. Eventually, these people managed to break it even through my thick skull that the best thing to do is learn every day. Learn from everybody you meet. Learn from every experience you have. I try to explain that to folks by explaining that I'm a scientist. I wasn't for the first half of my life. I became a scientist later on. And as a scientist, I learned that I'm wrong about everything. Every single thing I know will eventually be proven wrong. Think of the smartest scientists from 400 years ago. Everything they knew is wrong. Think of the smartest physicists from 200 years ago. Everything they knew is wrong. Eventually, everything I know will be proven wrong. So why should I clutch to it? Why shouldn't I be reaching for the future and trying to learn what's better and the new ways of doing this that people half my age or less are bringing forward, or that people my age or older are bringing forward? The new ways are where the future lies. So, yeah, I like to think I'm still learning every day. Uh, Great question.
Beautiful answer. We have another question. Sounds like it's from a mid level designer, and they say, how can I understand if I've become a senior UX designer? What are the skills I need to develop?
Wow. Yeah, every single HR group you talk to will have their own definition of this. Every single company will have their own definition of it. Every professional association will have their own definition of it. So, in a way, it's sort of a nonsense term these days. I would say that you're a senior UX designer if you can do a couple of things. If you can plan a successful project from start to finish, run it, extract the data from it, examine the data from it, and find out core findings and report them, then it's possible that you're a senior UX designer. Oh, I'm sorry, I was thinking researcher, not designer. I've answered the wrong question. To finish with the researcher side of it, if you if you can do all of that and get data that's actionable, not just numbers or quotes, but actually get actionable data, and then come back to it months later, do the same study again, and acknowledge and learn from the differences in your findings now compared to your findings then there's a chance that you're a senior researcher. Of course, it would also help if you have foundational knowledge of design and statistics and research principles. If you don't have those things, then don't accept the title. Though I shouldn't say that. If a company wants to give you a title and pay you more, accept it gladly. If they just want to give you the title and not pay you more, then I guess use it for your resume. But I know that's what you do now. People take jobs so that they have a better title in exchange for not getting compensation they could get. It's a sad thing because it makes people expect something else from you. To answer the question in terms of designer, if you're a senior UX designer, you can design a product from the get-go, from the scratch, from the concepts, test your designs, iterate on your designs in an informed way. So if somebody is having a certain reaction to your design, you understand the underlying psychology of that and the underlying ergonomics of that, and you know how to improve the design in response, right? And maybe one of the key skills of being senior in today's industry is the ability to politely disagree with stakeholders, because junior people shouldn't have to do that, but senior people need to if we're going to have standards in our industry. You have to be able to politely disagree with stakeholders, at least so that the disagreement is registered. It never has to be bad, it never has to involve confrontation, but it does have to involve documentation so that 3 months later when the product fails, they can say, we predicted it would. And this opens a huge can of worms for people doing political infighting and all kinds of horrible things. But boy, it would be good for the companies that are trying to release commercially successful products if everybody was held accountable for their interference.
That's a whole other conversation for us to have another day. And yeah, that's the kind of the answer that I typically give is part of it is going to be years of experience. Part of it is going to be, are you ready to mentor others? Since seniors very often are asked to help out juniors or check their work. So I would want to make sure that your work is good enough where you can start to be in that kind of micro leadership position. And I typically say that seniors have to be strategic, which I think is the short version of what John said, but he's totally right to explain it in detail. Can you approach a project strategically? Do you understand what are the right methods to do, how much time to spend on things, what to do with your concepts or the ones that fail and testing? Do you know how to work from research? Or are you just saying, here's what I like? So I think that every company should have some sort of competency matrix where they can tell you how they see a senior and what it takes to be promoted up to a senior. But those are some of the things that I look for. But again, your company may vary. We're going to stay a little bit later. We have one more question. It's a little bit longer, and it looks like this. I'm at a nice company as a UX designer with great colleagues, but sometimes it feels like people are okay with doing something just good enough and not pushing further for better. I think it's a bit because no one wants to really be the one standing up and no one really has experience to guide it between 3 and 7 years. I don't want to change company yet, but how do I make sure I keep being critical of what I do to get better?
Wow. Wow. I wish we could ask everybody who's been in a similar situation to put their hand up. You wouldn't be able to see the horizon.
Put an emoji in the chat, everybody. Well, they'll hear it 40 seconds later. Then you'll see the emojis go off.
Okay. Gosh. Yeah, I would not advise you to leave the company because of this. I would advise you to tell this story again when you're applying to the next company. A company that will support your growth professionally will look for someone who feels that way and is looking for an environment where there's more leadership. This is one of the reasons why after 1 or 2 years, you shouldn't be considered to be in a senior position, because after 1 or 2 years, you should still be asking this kind of question and looking for this kind of seniority in the organization, someone else who will stand up, maybe because they're a little safer, maybe because they're a little more certain in their knowledge, maybe because they have more social or political clout in the company. I wish you very good luck with it. Please don't lose your job over it. Please do stay thoughtful about these things. Maybe if you have friends who you trust in your circle amongst these nice people you're working with, maybe some of you can decide in working with a project manager or product manager or something, someone like that, more senior in terms of administration, you can decide ahead of time, can we maybe consider one of these projects coming up to be something we can devote more foundational research to? Or can we spend a little bit more time get first results before we take second designs? Things like that. Um, it's especially hard on the design side. On the research side, it's hard because a whole lot of people make decisions about science without any foundational knowledge about science. On the design side, it's hard because the same kind of attitude persists. And that makes it a little harder because in science, I can say to people, I'm sorry, what methodology is that? And then they get really angry because there isn't a methodology. And everybody in the room can see, oh, wow, they're really angry. Maybe they don't have a rational answer. Whereas on the design side, you can say, I'm sorry, what concept is that? Or which school of design suggests that? Or whose approach says that we should always use this kind of font or that kind of font, or this kind of layout pattern, or we should follow the golden mean exactly, or always invert the golden mean exactly, or whatever kind of nonsense people might be spouting. The rationale for defending their opinion will just be, I'm a more senior designer, and you can't argue with that in design. You should be able to, but you can't.
Yeah, it reminded me of I used to get a lot of, when I was more on the design side, I used to get a lot of, well, customers will like my idea better, from like a product manager or something like that. And I would always say, great, can you tell me more about the data you have that supports that? And then the conversation ended with anger. Yeah, because that person just said that as a power play. And I'm
Yeah.
not going to play along with that power play. So I'm going to say, sounds cool. How do you know that? And then there was no conversation. So I agree with John. This doesn't sound like a job you should necessarily leave. And I don't have a sense of maybe what level you're at, but I wonder if you can poke your manager a little bit and say, how do we grow? How do we push this a little bit more? How do we further what we're doing? We're doing design work and it's pretty good. And there's nice people here and I like it. But, how can we do even something a little bit more? How can we bring in more testing? Or how can we bring in more early generative research so that us designers aren't guessing so much? How can we bring more of a strategic approach in? How can we work from better problem statements instead of a stakeholder telling us what to do? So I think if you want to try to push things there a little bit gently, if you have a good relationship with your manager, maybe say, hey, having a great time here, really like it, nice people, nice work, but I don't know. I feel like we could probably do more. I feel like we could raise our game a little bit. Can we talk about that? And maybe it's yes and maybe it's no, but that might be where I could start if I felt that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd support that. Please be careful doing it
Right.
because it's sometimes sometimes the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and sometimes the nail that protrudes gets hammered down flat. And
Yes. As I
you don't
once
want to
said
get
to a
hammered
shitty
down flat.
client, the squeaky wheel gets taken off the car and thrown away.
Nice, nice.
So, yeah. So John's right. If you don't have a good relationship with that manager, if you don't feel like that person gets you and supports you, it may or may not be a conversation you're comfortable having. But again, if you have that good relationship, I would approach it gently, not as a demand, not as we suck if we don't do this, but just as a, hey, I wonder if we could do something even better. And
Yeah,
see what their
yeah.
reaction is, and it could be negative. So thank you for staying 10 extra minutes to make sure we got to people's questions. John, remind everybody how they can find you or follow you or read about you or stalk you later.
Okay, I'm impossible to find. I'm going to turn invisible shortly, and you'll never see me again for 2 months until I'm back on this show. If you Google John N.A. Brown, you can find books, magazines, journals, stuff that I've contributed to. Um, you might have to do a little bit of manipulation to find me on LinkedIn, but if you find me on LinkedIn, say hi, and we can connect. And
You have a
I will
picture
take
with
a
a
reasonable
fancy
number of
hat.
questions. Not anymore.
Oh,
The
okay.
fedora photo is gone.
Okay, damn it.
I was convinced to set. I think it's gone anyway. I was convinced to set it aside, and I think I did. Um, but yeah, I don't have an easy way to reach me. I have a website, but I keep the URL fairly well hidden online so that people I send there can find it and other people can't so easily.
You must know the
Um,
secret handshake.
you must, you must. If your URL and my URL didn't go to college together, you're not getting in. Um,
Tough.
yeah, I don't like to be that way. I'd love to have an easy way for people to communicate with me. Um, but maybe the best place to communicate openly and chat would be a couple of months from now back here.
That's also fair. So, just a reminder to people about our shows this week. My guest for tomorrow has not confirmed, so I have no idea if we have a show tomorrow, so I don't want to promote it too hard. Thursday, no show, and Friday, I have canceled the show because it's our critical thinking stream. I only got 2 things so far, and my boyfriend and I decided to jump in the camper for the weekend and drive 3 hours south and be local tourists in our own world. So if you are following my travel Instagram, you can follow along with that. Otherwise, certainly we'll be back next week. And as always, please do subscribe and tell friends about the channel. We are still growing steadily and need your help getting the word out. So let them know about the Delta CX YouTube channel and subscribe over here. Everything's archived, easy to search. And I hope to see everybody tomorrow, but in case my guest doesn't show up, see you next week. And thanks again to John. Look forward to seeing you again in 2 months.
I'm looking forward to it too. Take care,
Cool.
Debbie. Take care,
Bye.
everybody.
Customer centricity as business intelligence. Visit deltacx.com to learn why we are